This video will discuss the first part of section 4.5, which is the distance formula. The second video for this section will discuss the midpoint formulas. So, when we talk about the distance formula, essentially what we need to go back to is the Pythagorean theorem. So if we want to find the distance of any 2 points on a straight line, obviously if it's a horizontal or vertical line, it's easy to figure out, but when it's a diagonal line, it's not quite as easy. So we are going to go back to figuring out the first point has the coordinates x1, y1, and the second point has the coordinates x2, y2. And in this case, we want to find the distance between these two. And if you notice, this does create a triangle, and we know something about a right triangle. Right triangle, like I said, has the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagorean theorem says that a squared plus b squared is c squared. So if we let this side be a, this side be b, and our hypotenuse be c, then we can find the distance between those 2 points, namely c, the hypotenuse. A is really the distance from x1 to x2, so we substitute that in. We say x2 minus x1, and since it was squared, we need to square it. Plus b, as you can see, is the distance from y1 to y2. So this is going to be y2 minus y1, and we are going to square it because that's part of the Pythagorean theorem. And then this is going to be, I'm going to change this to d because we're trying to find the distance. Call that d squared. So if we want to solve explicitly for d, we can take the square root of both sides, and we end up with d is equal to the quantity x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And it is the square root of the whole thing, so we want to make sure we draw that line over the entire thing. So this here is our distance formula. I'll rewrite it down here just so we see it a few times. It is the square root of the quantity x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. That is our distance formula. This will allow us to find the distance between any 2 points in the Cartesian plane. So let's try some examples. We want to find the distance between the points 4, -7 and -5, 5. So if we plug into our formula, d is equal to the square root. We've got x2 minus x1, so we have -5 minus 4, and we need to square it, plus y2, which is 5, minus -7, and again we need to square that. And so this is where we need to be very careful with order of operations, because we need to make sure that we do that operation inside and then square the number that is left. So we end up with the square root of the quantity. We get -9 squared plus 5 minus -7 would give me 12 squared. Again, continuing to simplify, we need to simplify everything inside the radical before we can take the square root. -9 squared gives us a positive 81, because anything squared is positive, plus 12 squared is 144. If we add these together, we end up with the square root of 225. And the square root of 225 is exact. It comes out to be 15. So I would like you to pause the video at this point and try example 25. So you should have found that the distance between these 2 points is 5 units. This concludes the video for the distance formula. The next video will discuss the midpoint formula.